This is the Fujifilm 56 1.2. This is a great lens, but it also demands care. Let me explain. First of all, this is a beautiful looking lens. I mean, just look at this lens. It's so sleekly built. I love the way it looks, and what it produces in terms of the image quality and colors is amazing too. Let me show you some image. It's just an amazingly beautiful lens to use, aesthetically speaking, and also the output. But there are some problems that often come and bug you because this lens is a diva. It's got character. I mean, in some ways, this lens is like lenses that are 3 times or even 10 times the cost of this Fuji 56 1.2. And that has to do with the way it cuts light, the way it can see through haze, the way it can give you clear images against backlight, strong backlight. This lens truly has that quality. And I'm going to do a video specific to this matter, specific to the way this 56 1.2 can cut through haze, can cut through strong backlighting. And that's a very strong feature of this lens because you can creatively do a lot more and you can actually position your light very creatively if you know that your lens has that superpower. Very expensive wide life lenses has that sort of characteristic. For example, and those lenses are a minimum of 5,000 US dollars. So that's what I'm talking about when I talk about amazing image quality. When I talk about sharpness, I'm going to take you through some charts and I'm going to show you what kind of sharpness it has. It's a pretty sharp lens and it can resolve the 40 megapixel Fuji X-T5 or the Fuji X-H2. The more important thing is the color. I think the color is beautiful, rich, quite saturated, and at the same time, and see, color saturation along with very good contrast, very good haze cutting ability gives this lens kind of a superpower. The other magical thing about this lens is, of course, the other magical thing about this lens is that this lens feels like a full frame lens, and the images will feel like they're straight out of a full frame camera. Now, the tactile quality and the usability of this lens is something I love. Let me show you. I think you can hear how clicky the aperture ring is. I love it. When I put the aperture ring to A, what happens is that immediately it becomes shutter priority. And I don't have to do a lot of juggling. It's so simple for me to use, right? And that's the one good thing about usability about this lens. I love using this lens. But yes, I do feel that this lens is moody. First of all, you have to give it time while focusing. Focusing is much improved from the older version. But somewhere, if you compare this with modern mirrorless cameras and their 85mm lenses, there are some 85mm lenses with which you can actually shoot fast action. This baby is not that lens. You have to give her time. You cannot move too fast back and forth while shooting a subject, even when you are standing and the subject is not moving much. Basically, if there are movement at both ends, and even if you are in AFC, which is what AFC is supposed to do, right? The subject is moving, the photographer is moving a little bit, and AFC should work and give you acceptable, very good focus. On this lens, however, you may experience images out of focus. There is another strange thing about the 56 1.2. Okay, I'm back to the studio. Another interesting thing related to speed, like I was saying, is the aperture blades. Now, like I told you, the aperture blades can be set to auto. I mean, the aperture control can be set to auto right here. When the lens is set to A on the aperture ring, you're basically now using shutter priority. I like shooting in shutter priority at times. And when I'm shooting with shutter priority, and let's say I have bright scene here and not so bright scene here, and I'm changing between those two scenes, the exposure is changing, right? Now the aperture will have to quickly go open up or close down. This lens takes a bit of time to do that. As you can see here, like when I move from bright areas to the dark areas and dark areas to the bright areas, it takes a while. It's not instant. The aperture movement is not instant. But the camera calculates, as you can see, the camera instantly shows that it's telling you f16, it's telling you f5 or f3.5. It just, the camera is telling the lens what value to get to. It's just that the aperture takes a bit more time than usual than most other lenses, I would say, to get back to position of correct exposure. So, like I said, you have to handle this beauty with care. This is a phenomenal lens with some character to it. You have to understand how the lens actually works to get the best out of it, which is true of your car, which is true of your cameras, which is true of many things, which is true of the people in your lives. So I'll say it's good to get to know how the lens actually works before you take it to a job. Now I want to talk about image quality again. I said that the image quality of this lens is stunning, right? There are a couple of flaws. There are minor things and you will not even notice them, honestly. But if you really go deep and understand what the lens is doing inside, you will find a few things. You will find that it can close focus very well, but for best results, look, it's very sharp when it's close focusing at, let's say, f1.2, which is very rare. Most macro lenses start at 2.8 or f4. This is not a macro lens, but the reproduction ratio, I'll write it somewhere, is good, and you can get close to an object and you can see the detail. You start seeing better results at f1.8 to f2.8. By the time you've stopped down to f2.8 or f4, you get very sharp images out of this lens when you're close focusing. If there are texture and fine lines on the object that you're shooting, and by coming close to it, you will see those details easily starting f1.8. You will see enough at f1.2 as well, but of course it's not the best. One more interesting thing about this lens, character about this lens, is how the light transmission actually works with this lens. And I'm going to show you a recording of my Lightroom, and you can see as you move from different apertures, mind you, the exposure is set to the same value. You can see the EV value is exposure value is set to 0. There is no change there. But as I move from f1.2 and close down the lens a little bit more, you will see till 1.8 there is no problem. But there are some f-stops where you can see suddenly the lens is actually allowing a little less light than what the camera had anticipated. The camera does not show any change in EV. It's going to show that it's at the same exposure value. But if you can look at the Lightroom file, if you look at the histogram, you'll see that the histogram, the curve is moving backward a little bit. That means on that file, there's a little bit of less light. Have a look at the right side of this panel. You can see the brightness value here, the exposure bias here. So it's all set at 0 EV so that it's never underexposed or overexposed. Now see how the brightness value actually changes as the F number here changes, although 0 EV is kept at 0 EV. So if I move to the next picture, it's now shot at f 1.4. It's fine, mostly the same amount of brightness value. Let's go to 1.6. You can see it just dipped from 5.51 to 5.47. But if I go to 1.8 here, I can see a significant dip. All right, so you can see the histogram here as well. You can see the histogram move to the left. If I go to f2, it goes further left. If I go to f2.8, it again comes back forward a little bit, but then again f4 means it goes back. And suddenly at f8, the change between f5.6 and f8 seems to be a lot, right? And you can see that in the picture as well. Overall, it's a dimmer picture, but if you look at it, the exposure value, the exposure bias is set at 0 EV, meaning at f5.6, the shutter speed was 1/50th of a second. At f8, the shutter speed was at 1/25th. So exactly one stops difference. But you can clearly see that the brightness value of the picture is much lower, and that's very interesting. So you basically get high brightness value at 1.4, 1.6, 1.8, and then onwards it starts to come down little by little. And by the time you come at f8 or f11 or 5.6, the brightness value actually comes down quite a bit. Now I'll give cursory glance to a couple of things. The lens is very sharp, like I said. It's very sharp almost corner to corner, but you will see the best sharpness starting at 1.8 to f4. f5.6 is again great, but beyond that you will start losing sharpness because of diffraction. Diffraction is real, it's a physical thing. Unless lens technology improve so much that it can fight the nature of light even better, you'll keep seeing this problem. So because it's a 40 megapixel X-T5, it's an extremely densely packed, pixel packed sensor. So for any lens to resolve so much detail is a tremendous job. And understand, this lens, if this lens is resolving almost 40 megapixels at f5.6, that means if the same formula of this lens was actually applied on a full frame lens, a similar lens on a full frame camera will actually resolve for more than 80 megapixels, even beyond f5.6. I don't know how many lenses are out there, especially in its price point, that's that good in its optical quality. So remember that. That's a great thing. But yes, the limitation is that if you go beyond f5.6, you won't find any problem with your XH2S 26 megapixels or XS20 or XT3, but you will not get those all of those 40 megapixels at f, let's say, 8 on your XH2 or on your XT5. Lastly, of course, wide open, there is a bit of vignetting which starts to go away starting f4. But you know what matters in the end? What matters is this lens looks beautiful. This lens feels such a beautiful part of my camera, of my X-T5. It feels so organic, so wholesome together. It sounds so mechanical and beautiful. Let me show you something very interesting. The weather sealing in this lens is brilliantly done, right? You have one rubber sealing here, and then just around the mouth of the lens, you can see the back bayonet of the lens, this thing here. It also protrudes and it's got this cover here, almost to give that extra additional last layer protection for the sensor. That's an amazing way to build this lens. I haven't seen that on any other lens, to be honest, on any other lens, on any other mount. So it just feels great to know that you have this lens. This is Fuji's best work, along with the 33 1.4. And I would say this is actually one of the best lenses that I've used on any mount. And especially at the price point, like I said, the way it can cut through haze, cut through, see the details through a lot of light, cutting through the light, it's tremendous. The contrast, the color reproduction is great. And lastly, I talked about the autofocus. Honestly, the autofocus is not too bad. Like I'll show you on another video, I have the Sigma 56 1.4, which is a very fast focusing lens, tiny lens. And I also have the Viltrox 75 1.2. Honestly, this lens, the Fuji, sits right in between. The Sigma is faster, but for all the talk about how the autofocus is not up there yet, it is actually very good. And if you have the XH2S, you're going to see a slightly better, faster autofocus performance. When it comes to video, yes, it's not the best video autofocusing lens because it can hunt a little bit. But when it comes to stills, honestly, for portraiture, stills, studio work, you're not going to see any problem. It doesn't hunt. It just takes a bit of time to get to the point and focus. A lot of people have also complained about that this lens actually makes noise. And so you can't actually mount a mic on top of the camera and talk in front of it. But hey, this is an 85 millimeters lens. Yes, there is a bit of focusing noise, but even if you're sitting in front of the camera, you're going to be back there in order to fit in the frame. So you'll not be able to actually use a on-camera mic anyway. You have to use a lapel mic or a wireless mic. So this whole complaint about the lens making a bit of noise while focusing, I think that's an absolute grand non-issue because I don't think it's a practical problem. Yes, the focusing could have been better. You could have gotten much better hit rates while shooting kids running around freely. But that's about it. The rest of the stuff about autofocus is really, really good. But in the end, I'll say it feels like a premium lens. It feels like a classy lens. It feels like an elegantly built beautiful lens. It has that old world class. So she's beautiful. She's got some tantrums, but she's a classy lady. I think you should just go and propose. You should get this lens. If you like this video, subscribe and help me reach 10,000 subscribers. I'd like to reach there by the next 4 months. And I would really invite your help. I'm going to make a lot more Fuji content going forward. I'm going to see you soon with another one.